Thanks for joining us.
Talkline Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast network, the voice of the Jewish community.
Welcome to the podcast. You are now tuned in to this episode of our podcast. Today, we are going to interview some of the greatest and most influential minds in our field. And now, please welcome your host.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And we're back. We're our weekly segment on the latest in kosher food and travel, you name it. Fleishigs Magazine has a lot of meat to discuss about these issues. Shlomo Klein is the co-founder, co-publisher of Fleishigs Magazine. So good to have you back. TNT, Thursday Night Tip. Welcome back.
Good to be back, and we should probably start off by talking about what we were talking before, wrapping up from last week's segment.
People said to me, I got a lot of reaction. They said, Shlomo said there's no kosher hotels in the city. There is one on the Lower East Side, the hotel. I got a few emails about that.
So I went and just checked it out. I see there is a place called Blue Moon, New York. Not familiar with it. It's a hotel on the Lower East Side, and they have food from a restaurant at the bottom of the hotel or next door called Sweet Dreams Bakery. To me, that's news. I think, Zev, I think me and you need a date. We need to go check it out.
We got to check it out. There are always new places opening up. I mean, I'm getting lots of news. Kasbah, great. We used to be Deli Kasbah. Kasbah's reopening on the west side, and always new places that are opening up. And
Deli Kasbah, I mean, listen, you have to come prepared because you have your Dvar Torah, you get your free dessert. I mean, come on.
Well, those that don't know, in fact, we did a story on years ago. They used to have videos of Lubavitcher Rebbe playing in the background, and if you gave it Dvar Torah, you got a free dessert. I don't know if they're still doing that, but that was a big thing. But
I wonder how inflation and the economy is going to affect that. Maybe you're going to have to give a pilpul. You're going to have to give a longer Dvar Torah.
If you're longer Dvar Torah, exactly, or you have to quote Tanya in there. Maybe that's nowadays. but it's a great restaurant, so I'm glad to see Kasbah's opening up. But one of the interesting things is that you have a lot of the same. You have Chinese, and you have some Mexican, maybe a little bit here Italian. But some of the other cuisines can't seem to make it. Vietnamese cuisine didn't seem to make it so well.
You'd be surprised. First of all, they're all making it. They're all making it in different ways. Dedicated restaurants to specific cuisines. That's the challenging part. But
like dedicated restaurants, you have dedicated Chinese.
You're saying Vietnamese. If you go to, there's so many restaurants now that are doing. Oh my God! Now that we just mentioned it, the sandwich is called not a bao bun. The sandwich. Okay, we'll get back to it in a second. But they're all doing variations of the sandwich. They may not be doing a Vietnamese restaurant, but it's become a very popular menu item. But what's interesting about the different cuisines is that it definitely is it's called a banh mi, by the way. Sorry, my bad. It slipped my mind as if, we're live, I guess, the nerves. But it's called a banh mi, and you see different restaurants doing vegan banh mi's, fish banh mi's, doing meat banh mi's. They're all doing it in different ways. You see a lot of the Asian, Vietnamese, Thai, and Japanese, the different versions of broth with noodles, ramen, pho, all these different things. There aren't too many restaurants just specializing and focusing on that, but many restaurants are incorporating it into the menus.
Well, that's true. And you had restaurants that used to have a mixture of Chinese and deli. But as far as a themed restaurant, for example, I think there even was one in Crown Heights, a Vietnamese style restaurant. I don't think they were able to make it.
It was called Pho Men. It didn't last very long. It was very challenging. Right now, listen, I mean, you do have dedicated cuisine, restaurants with dedicated cuisine. You have a place in the city now called Sensacana. They are doing Peruvian food, and they really stick to the menu. I think they added, if I'm not mistaken, they add like 1 or 2 steaks just to keep it more typical. But most of the menu is Japanese, Asian influenced, really different. It's really exciting. I mean, you have different ceviches and crudos, and then even their quinoa fried rice. They have a schnitzel dish that comes served with like a blue potato salad. On top of the schnitzel, it's a Japanese style schnitzel with a katsu, with an egg salad, strip of egg salad on top. If you asked me 5 years ago, I probably would never have ordered it. Even today, I don't know if I would order it, unless someone told me you got to go try it. Today, I'm telling people go try it because that's something that it just works.
Well, and people are traveling, so they want some of the cuisine in different countries. But for example, except in Bukhari neighborhoods, a Russian restaurant that's kosher, you don't see really mainstream in lots of places. Except
Bukhari is like a whole separate beast. I mean, it's actually been popping up a lot. We've done quite a few articles in the magazine about Bukhari cuisine, and I mean, you go to Queens, you have a lot of options between Bukharian and Georgian, which is different. I mean, if people think of Marani being Bukharian, it's actually Georgian or Gruzini. But Bukharian foods, I mean, you have now Art of the Grill has been very popular. There's a place we went to recently called Chaikana, something like that. Small little place. I can tell you, it's probably they got seating there maybe for 10, 20 people. It's a small.
It's about in Queens.
In Queens.
Right. In other words, in Bukharian areas, yeah, but I'm talking about as far as going to non-Bukharian areas, you have, in other words, you have.
Well, you do have it. I mean, you have it in Borough Park. There's a place that people go to for many years. On Coney, there's a place called King Solomon. Borough Park, I mean, I haven't been to the one in Borough Park on 13th, actually. I think it's called Samarkand or Asia. I don't even remember.
Is that still open? I'm just trying to think.
There you go. But you have, even in the city, you have a place called Tom Tov. They're doing a lot. But, I mean, that Bukharian is very popular right now, between plov and baksh and like the different
you know, look, I love Bukhari. I actually was in Uzbekistan, so I actually sampled the food when I was there years and years ago. I think the cuisine is great, and you know, and Bukharian community is starting to emerge on its own and growing. So it's
are you kidding me? Here in the 5 towns, the Bukharian community has grown tremendously to the point that I went to the barber before Pesach sometime, and he's Bukharian, a really nice guy. He's into food too. And he knows the magazine, and he told me that he's like, you don't know baksh. And he went, and for the next day, he actually brought me some lady who makes it with hashgacha, I think, in her house, and he brought me her baksh. It was actually phenomenal. But it was just, there actually is a very big Bukhari community.
By the way, a lot of the hairdressers in the city are Bukharian. I don't know if people are aware of that.
It's hairdresser to the stars, yeah, for sure.
In fact, I remember there was an Italian kosher restaurant on the east side owned by an Italian, not Jewish, who actually had some hair salons too. I think he closed the restaurant, which was a great Italian kosher. I love Italian kosher, and he ended up still sticking to his hair salons.
Sure.
But for example, you had Japanese restaurants you had a while back. And maybe you don't see Korean red. There's so many different areas.
Korean is a tough one for some reason, and people are into it. It's very popular. Korean barbecue is very popular right now.
But you don't see a Korean restaurant.
You know one that just never made it for some reason is Indian. I love Indian.
I like Indian meat, not the vegetable, but I had the Indian meat for some. They opened up.
So there are some vegetarian places still with some kind of hashgacha, but like the Fleishigs places, they didn't last. It's challenging for some reason. I think it's too unique, too different for the kosher palates. Talia's in the city has been doing these pop-ups, and he actually brings in a special Indian chef. One of them, I went for it. Her food was good. I like that. I like going to restaurants and trying these different cuisines. But you go to restaurants now, like Tabernacle has on the menu, they have something called a hot pot. Fascinating. They bring you basically a hot pot of, they bring you a burner, and the mashgiach comes and lights it for you. It's a whole show. And you basically they bring you the broth, you cook your meat in it, and you're getting that real Asian hot pot experience right there on the spot, which is fascinating.
Which you do in by the way, one of my favorite restaurants in the club was Manna Fusion in Queens. Gorgeous restaurant. The food
was where they like papagayo. They bring you the skewers and cut it off. That's Brazilian steakhouse.
Brazilian steakhouse, right? So. Again, I thought the food was fantastic. I would just a shame that they closed. Maybe it was the location. Maybe it should have been in the city. I'm not sure.
Going to be hard. I mean, before them, they had a hibachi there, which was actually outstanding. And hibachi is another type of a food experience that hasn't done too well in the kosher market. There's one in Brooklyn. From what I understand, they're actually back working on the place here in 5 Towns on Central Avenue. I think it's the same owner is making a hibachi place, and that's going to be they haven't been working on it for a while. From what I understand, they started again.
So many different cuisines, and who knows? You know, maybe you have to have one building where you can pick a choice. One floor is Italian, one floor is Mexican, one floor is Korean.
I had a dream. I actually had a dream of opening a restaurant. It wouldn't work, and the idea was like literally every month to change the cuisine, because there is so much out there, and people are starting to appreciate it. I mean, like. It used to be a typical steakhouse. We had our basic things. I remember before sushi. I mean, back in the day, you had what was that restaurant? That wasn't even a restaurant. We got all excited about Circa. Circa used to make salads.
Circa, right? I remember.
And now that's become typical. Every supermarket, every place has a make your own salad. Sushi, before sushi, now sushi is like every single restaurant, whether you're a pizza store or a steakhouse, everyone's doing sushi.
Right, and even though herring for Kedushin, people have sushi, but herring is still making a comeback. It has made a comeback, I should say.
Oh, herring is very popular. Yeah.
Right,
Israeli food, Mediterranean food has been very popular. I saw in the city there's a Daryema, a new Moroccan place open up. I saw a place called Bis. I haven't been. Daryema, I checked out. It was really cool. Moroccan, authentic Moroccan food. Bis was like another Israeli place. A lot of Israeli food and modern Israeli food has been opening up.
Well, there's been in Manhattan, you have a modern Israeli restaurant that's not kosher, but has Hebrew signs on it. It's doing very, very well. I think it's called Dagan. I think that's what it's called.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, but again, they have a Hebrew name and they have Hebrew lettering.
Well, there's actually a bunch of really big Israeli chefs who have restaurants in Chelsea Market and all over Manhattan. Meir Adoni has a restaurant in the city. A lot of his chefs that worked for him some of them have gone to the kosher communities and become chefs in kosher restaurants. Actually, in California, I met one or two. Florida, I just met someone recently. But a lot of them have restaurants in the city, too, that aren't kosher. Israeli food is very popular right now.
Very, very popular. It's a shame that it's not kosher, but because they probably could make it kosher. But some of them, I guess, are so secular, maybe they don't want to make it kosher.
I think we're doing pretty well with modern Israeli food options on the kosher market. In the city right now, you have Rothschild, is like that style. I was in California recently. You have two really cool places. A place called Next Door, that's in the LA area. And you have a place in the valley called Tel Aviv Tapas. And they're both like that really modern Israeli. You feel like you're in Tel Aviv, and the way the food comes out and the presentation and the flavors, it's a really cool experience.
And even in Tel Aviv, you have a lot more kosher restaurants than you had years ago. I went there 100%. In the 1990s. I was friendly with Tzvi Kamalkin, the Mossad agent who captured Adolf Eichmann. So we went to visit him. He lived in Tel Aviv. I said, Tzvi, I need a kosher restaurant. I figured a guy was on the Mossad. He probably knows where all the kosher restaurants are. So he walked down the street. He opens up a Yemenite restaurant. He opens the door and he screams on top of his lungs, "Are you kosher?" And the lady goes, "Yes." He goes, "I found you a kosher restaurant."
Yeah.
But we'll have to continue this conversation because kosher cuisine and restaurants and
international cuisine in the kosher market is definitely a big. It's found its place, and I think different cuisines are getting stronger than others. But we're finally coming around to tasting and appreciating other stuff.
So we'll continue with that. Shlomo Klein has been with us. You can read Fleishigs Magazine. I believe the Shavuos issue is already out. The dairy issue.
About different cuisines. The dairy issue come out is the Rome issue. It's all about Italian foods, which many of us are very familiar with, but there's plenty of stuff there that we aren't. Dairy recipes, and then soon we'll be doing some meat recipes. The show coming up, Kosher Palooza. I mean, there's going to be international cuisine. There's going to be food from all over the world.
Are you going to have a Korean stand there too, or at the Kosher Palooza?
We got to work on it. We got to work on finding a restaurant or chef that wants to.
I had somebody that wanted to talk about make a kosher Caribbean restaurant. Somebody talked a couple of years. It never happened, but I had somebody who was in. I think there's a market where you have kosher Caribbean food.
There's also, listen, nowadays we were talking about travel. I mean, people are traveling to Jamaica and the islands, and your options for kosher you have more and more options. You find that private chefs, people taking private chefs, or they're finding places that actually are cooking that local cuisine kosher.
Shlomo Klein, the co-editor, co-publisher, co-founder, Fleishigs Magazine, and soon to be, he's a kosher food expo. It's more than a kosher food expo. Kosher Palooza will tell you about that's coming up. Wow, not that far. What's the date for that?
June 28th in the Meadowlands.
Wow, June 28th. Big event, and we'll give you more information about it. Thank you. Look forward to our next installment.
Thank you for tuning in to
Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, the pulse beat of the Jewish community.
For continuous Jewish programs, TalklineNetwork.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the TalklineNetwork.com.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
By the way, I